Yeah, it's not like we're going to
just
look
that.
at
But I'm not very good at photos, but
There are two kinds of stones. The larger ones are the sarsens, a type of hard sandstone, probably brought from the Marlborough Downs, 30 kilometres or 19 miles away. Sarsens can weigh over 30 tonnes. The tallest one here stands over 7 metres high, with another 2.5 metres below ground. The smaller stones inside the circle, still weighing up to 3 tonnes, are called bluestones. They're actually a variety of volcanic rock, all with a blue-grey colour. They were brought from the Preseli Hills in southwest Wales, over 240 kilometres or 156 miles away. How were these heavy stones brought here? Susan Greeny, English heritage archaeologist, explains.
They were brought by a system of using probably wooden rollers and wooden sledges to drag the stones over land, and also probably along rivers and over the sea by use of simple boats and rafts. The ones from the Marlborough Downs were brought entirely over land, so that would have entailed huge amounts of timber, large amounts of ropes and huge amounts of people to drag the stones over the countryside to Stonehenge.
The sarsens on the outside of the monument are part of what was probably a complete circle. Some of the uprights still have their horizontal stones or lintels on top. Inside, you can see some even larger stones. These ones formed a horseshoe of 5 trilithons. A trilithon, from the Greek for 3 stones, is made of 2 upright stones and 1 horizontal lintel. Some of these have now fallen. As you continue round the circle, see if you can spot the smaller blue stones among the sarsens. Before you leave this part of the tour, you might want to hear about how the stones were constructed, the effort it must have taken, or a theory of Stonehenge as a place of healing. To hear about how the stones were shaped, enter 41. To get an idea of the efforts involved in constructing Stonehenge, enter 42. And to hear about Stonehenge as a place of healing, enter 43. As you've heard, we aren't sure why Stonehenge was built. Professor Timothy Darville shares his theory.
Well, I see Stonehenge as a great sanctuary, which is initially constructed with these big stones around the outside, but the really powerful bits are these blue stones, which are actually inside the circle. And there are about 80 of these, and they get rearranged many times over.
The idea of powerful stones isn't a new one. In the early 12th century, medieval scholar Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote about how the stones of Stonehenge had special healing powers. There are oral traditions today in Wales that the Preseli Hills, where the blue stones come from, have magical properties. And at Stonehenge, people were breaking up and removing chunks of bluestone from an early date in the monument's history, perhaps taking them away like amulets.
Seen as a healing centre, Stonehenge would undoubtedly draw pilgrims, perhaps from all over Europe, and indeed we do have burials in the area of people who have come a great distance, perhaps from Central Europe. We also have people buried around about who seem to have some extraordinary ailments, and we have people who have really quite severe injuries to their legs or to their body. All of these things lead us to believe that Stonehenge must be considered a pilgrimage centre, which is well known right across the ancient world. In that sense, it would have acted like an ancient version of Lourdes or perhaps Santiago de Compostela.
The bluestones must have been regarded as special to bring them all the way from southwest Wales. What do you think about the notion of stones with healing powers? If you haven't yet heard about how the stones were shaped, enter 41. To your right, and about 50 metres or about 150 feet away, you'll see a large grass-covered mound. This is a round barrow. Look out from Stonehenge in almost any direction and you'll spot more of them. There are some on a ridge called King Barrow Ridge beyond this nearby barrow, and there are more on the other side of the busy main road in an area called Normanton Down. Round barrows were built after construction activities at Stonehenge had finished, from about 2300 BC until about 1600 BC. Many of these mounds were placed along the ridges overlooking Stonehenge, indicating that the monument remained an important site building work was complete. There are more than 300 mounds within a 3-kilometre or 2-mile radius of Stonehenge, one of the highest concentrations in Britain. Each barrow covered the graves of what we assume were prominent people. The earliest barrows contained burials. Later, some covered cremations. Often the person was buried with spectacular grave goods, including stone, bone and bronze tools, pottery, ceremonial battle axes, and ornaments made from exotic materials like jet, amber and gold. Some of these finds are on display in the visitor centre. Often, several burials can be located beneath a single barrow, as Susan Greeny explains.
They might have had a burial, for example, or surrounded by a ring of posts. Then they might have put a mound over that. Then they might have put another burial in and then enlarged the mound and dug a ditch around it. So what we see when we look at the little round mound is really the last stage in their history.
When these barrows were first built, the chalk would have gleamed white against the grass. Before you move on, you might want to learn about the antiquaries, the collectors and early archaeologists who first excavated the barrows near Stonehenge. Just enter 51. Or perhaps you'd like to hear about a burial in the ditch at Stonehenge, the Stonehenge Archer. Enter 52. Stonehenge is a circular monument, so it may surprise you to hear that you're looking at the back. Quite a lot of sarsens are missing from this side, and those that remain aren't as carefully shaped as the ones closer to the avenue. Susan Greeny tells us why.
This is probably because the back side of the monument wasn't quite so important for the builders of Stonehenge, and they seem to have not dressed the stones quite so carefully, and they may have used slightly shorter stones than they needed, or chose slightly more irregular stones for this back portion, and that suggests that the back wasn't so important to be seen as from the front.
Some archaeologists think that the stone circle may not have been completed at all. Some of the stones seem too narrow or short to have supported lintels. The stones on this side, which probably wasn't built so well, were the first to fall over. Some must have been broken up and taken away.
People were taking the stones just as a useful source of building material, because Salisbury Plain in particular doesn't have really any stones readily available.
An advantage to viewing Stonehenge from this less complete side is that you have a good view of the inner horseshoe and some of the smaller blue stones. Take a few moments to look for the various types of stone structures. The sarsen trilithons, 2 uprights supporting a lintel. Bumps called tenons that once slotted into holes in the lintels, and the smaller blue stones. You're also standing roughly on the solstice axis of the monument, facing towards the northeast, where the sun rises in midsummer. The stones weren't always in the arrangement you see today, however. The sarsens and blue stones were first set up in 2500 BC. Once they were raised, they weren't moved, but the blue stones were rearranged, and perhaps more than once. They were placed in their current positions by about 2200 BC. While you're here, you may want to hear about archaeology at Stonehenge, or the relationship between the Druids and Stonehenge. For archaeology, enter 61.